Alright, sup guys, we are the legit intellectual genius music making amigos, also known as Ligmma. We made a dope project, and I'm Wesley. This is my boy Scott.
I'm Scott.
Yuran, and Vincent, and Melodie's filming, so she's in it, I swear. And then our project's over here.
Alright boys, so this is the music maker right here. And so essentially what we have here is we have something, hardware, that scans a disc that looks like this. And so essentially the concept is that you have a disc that transmits data. And as you can see, if you look at the disc, it's divided into a bunch of little sections. And each of those sections are essentially a different color. It's either light or dark. And so essentially you can use a combination of these sections to represent a note. So we essentially have a program that takes music data as input and then spits out an image of a disc, and you can print that really easily out on a printer and stick it in the machine. So this is the Russian song. So as you can see, we have the motor spinning the disc. The data is moving past the color sensor, and the sensor is moving back and forth to follow the data. Turn up. You can see it's nice and quiet right now. This song touches my heart every time. Hey, back there.
We are now going to explain how the design cycle played a role in our project to identify the needs of the project. One of the ideas we had for the machine was to have the color sensor read different RGB components that correspond to different notes, volumes, and note lengths. Identify a problem. The problem we had was that the printer was not printing out the colors and RGB components completely separate of each other, so the color sensor was not getting an accurate read of which notes to play. Essentially, the colors are blurring together. Think of possible solutions. Possible solutions were to change the color sensor to read CMYK values or to read hexadecimal colors, to take out color in general and just have the color sensor read which notes to play.
Planning a promising solution. We decided to change the design to be in bits and bytes by having light regions correspond to 1 and dark regions correspond to 0s. Also, to make up for the loss of data, we put the strain into a spiral shape so that we could have more data printed on the paper disc. Create and build. We made a JavaScript program that takes a series of music notes and converts this into a spiral of data that the machine can understand and read. Our machine that we built was made from old CD parts. A motor spun the disc and another motor moved the color sensor back and forth to follow the current line of the disc. We incorporated color sensors, which reads the colors in chronological order, which converts into data. We used a system of breadboards and different wires to connect this machine to speakers. Test and evaluate prototype. When testing the new spiral design, it worked for the most part, but we did find that sometimes it got a bad read in calibration, so the song would have parts with wrong notes.
So improve and redesign. We tested the disc multiple times to improve the song sequence and to find ways to make sure that it was set up correctly to get a correct read. We found that most of the problems stemmed from the alignment of the disc with the color sensor, not from our code.
Before we even put music or anything into this, we essentially made this part from a CD be able to focus on a piece of paper. And so essentially the color sensor is composed right here. It's composed of two things. You have a lens, and a receiving sensor that can sense light. And so essentially what happens is that light shines up the lens, which hits the paper, and then depending on the color of the paper, more light or less light reflects back into the sensor. So essentially you need to write code that focuses the lens on the paper. And so essentially what we did is that we had a bunch of small things like that we just figured out how to solve one step at a time. Like basically once we got it focusing on the paper, then we started working on it follow the line. So essentially we wrote code that will essentially slowly move this thing this way in order to follow the spiral. And to do that, that was a similar issue. Essentially, you can move the color sensor left and right and see whether the color becomes darker or lighter. And if it becomes darker, then you essentially stepped in the right direction. Essentially, that was actually the hardest part of the design. Once we had it following the spiral and focusing on the spiral, then essentially it was all that was left was just converting this data into music.
How we did, fourth or technically last, because we did not have an instruction manual, which apparently was a thing that is needed, and obviously sets apart in intellect and skills needed to create a music machine such as the one we have made. Was it fair? No, but whatever.
Alright, so basically what we would do differently is don't procrastinate, and I think anyone could tell you that.
Advice for upcoming freshmen. Come earlier than 5 minutes so you can be with the other music makers.
Alright, don't be trying to make the other songs 30 minutes before you have to be at Fed.
If you want to place, first, write an instruction manual. 2. Don't have the solving anthem as your best and most accurate song. 3. Don't name your team Ligmma.
Yeet, she's rocking, boys.
What song are you gonna play now?